Welcome to lesson number 3 in our study in the book of Revelation. We're going to focus on Revelation 12 verses 1 to 6. That's the onslaught of the evil trio, which is the dragon. We use the same method as in the previous passages. So we use the method of the GPS. It is the God positioning system. It helps us to determine the message to the original receiver, because between us and the people of the Bible there are many differences. So we go back into the time, get to the message to the original receiver, ask ourselves, is this applicable or not? And if it's applicable, we communicate it in the 21st century. So let's start with the process of understanding. And now we know it is the acronym of START we are using. The S stands for situation. The type of literature is the T. The A is analyze the passage. The R is to relate the message to the rest of the Bible. And T, we test our findings. But it is in step number 3 we spend most of our time. Number 1 and 2, we approach the passage by determining what's the situation and the type of literature. Step 4 and 5, we outside the passage again, just to determine whether we are on track or not. So let's start with the situation. By now we know that Revelation is about persecution. It's a difficult time for the church. It's the first century after Christ. They are being persecuted by the Romans. And we know that this type of literature, it's prose, it's a narrative, and it's apocalyptic way of writing. It's very symbolic. And we see that this passage is in the middle part. It's in D of the book. We know that the book is divided in 7 blocks, which focus on the same period from the first coming to the second coming of Christ. And Revelation chapter 12 is in block number D. Then the A is we analyze the passage. This is where we spend our time. We look out for the symbolism and contrast. We mark the main themes, and then we conclude the message to the original receiver. So this is where we spend most of our time. Let us read the 6 verses of chapter 12. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Amen. This is loaded with symbolism. But let's see what we can make out of this. We have the first one, which is the woman. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman. We know by now that the woman is the church, Revelation 19 and 7, verse 7, as well as 21, verse 9. So the woman is clothed with the sun. It describes the radiance of this woman, and this woman is unchallengeable. And then the moon under her feet, it depicts her position of authority. You can also read Psalm 8, verse 3 to 4. And a crown of 12 stars on her head. It's a crown of victory. So this woman is radiant. She depicts authority and victory. And then she was pregnant in verse 2. Then another sign appeared in heaven. So we first have the sign of the woman. Now another sign appeared in heaven. An enormous red dragon. Now red reflects the bloodthirsty nature of this dragon. And the dragon is Satan. 7 heads is supposed perfect ability to lay plans, and we know that Satan is brilliant with that. 10 horns, it refers to great power. And I would like to show you that many of the symbolism we get in the book of Revelation, we also get in the book of Daniel. Daniel 7 and the following chapters in Daniel were also written in apocalyptic kind of literature. Let me just show you about the 10 horns in Daniel 7. Daniel 7 verse 7. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was a fourth beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts. It had 10 horns. There we have 10 horns as well. But this fourth beast refers to Rome. The first 3 beasts in the book of Daniel refers to the world powers of those days. The first beast was Babylon. It was depicted as a lion. The second one was a bear. It's the Medo-Persian powers. The third one was the Macedonian or Greek power, the leopard. And now the fourth beast, terrifying, that is Rome. And then we have the 10 horns. It indicates that the influence sphere of authority is comprehensive. And in Revelation 13, we'll get to that passage in our next study. In Revelation 13, John's beast combined characteristics of Daniel's 4 beasts. So in the book of Revelation, you have 1 beast, but it is a combination of the 4 beasts mentioned in the book of Daniel. So the 10 horns, it indicates power. And then 7 crowns, it indicates presumptuous authority of Satan. And then we see it's in the wilderness. The woman fled into the wilderness. The wilderness for the Israelites was a place of spiritual refuge. It's a place where God took care of them. Just think of the Exodus, where God took care of them. And then you have 1,260 days that God will take care of them. That is actually at the time of persecution. So where does this come from? Let me show you. The woman, the church, flees to the desert, where she will suffer for 1,260 days. This period of time probably refers to plus minus 3.5 years, during which Antiochus Epiphanes cruelly persecuted the Jews. And we get that in Daniel. According to Daniel 7:25 and 12:7, Antiochus Epiphanes would reign only for a time, which is 12 months, and times 24 months, and half a time 6 months. This gives us 3.5 years, which consist of 1,260 days. So when the Revelation speaks of 1,260 days, it has that in mind, and that period of persecution will come to an end. So what do we have in this passage? Well, we have in verse 1 and 2, we have the first sign. It's a woman. We know it's Christ or the church, and then it was clothed with the sun, with the moon, and she was pregnant and cried out in pain, and she was about to give birth. Christ was going to be born from this woman. And then in verses 3 and 4, throughout history, Satan tried to hinder Christ's birth. I will show you a little bit later more detail about that. And then the first line in verse 5, Christ gave birth to a son. So we see in A, it's about the woman is going to give birth to a son. And then we see another sign, it's about the dragon, Satan. And now it's back to the son. She, the woman, gave birth to a son, a male child. So Christ was born from out the church. And then we see in the second part of verse 5, Christ has all authority, because and her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. So Satan was unable to kill this baby. And then in verse 6, God looks after the church until Christ comes again. So we have a perfect chiastic structure here, which is the central part is in the middle. So we see Christ was going to be born from a woman, and we see Christ looks after the church until Christ comes again. So that relates to one another. And then B, throughout history, Satan tried to hinder Christ's birth, and then we realize Christ has all authority. And then the central part is the important part. Christ was born. Throughout history, Satan tried to prevent the birth of Jesus. Let's first look at the promise. God called Abraham to be a blessing to the nations. God repeated this promise throughout the Old Testament. Satan tried to prevent the fulfillment of these promises. Cain killed the righteous Abel. During the time of Noah, all the people rebelled against God. And then all the nations rebelled against God at the Tower of Babel. Pharaoh also gave the command to kill all the Israelite baby boys. Satan also tried to prevent Jesus from fulfilling God's promises. Herod's order to kill the Jewish baby boys during the time of Jesus' birth. Jesus was tempted by the devil to lead him astray. Attempts by people to kill Jesus. Satan entered Judas to betray Jesus. Not even Jesus' death could stop the fulfilling of God's promises. His death became the means of our salvation. We've done the symbolism and the main theme, so we just need to conclude and summarize the message to the original receiver. We see that the church ministers in a broken reality and will experience persecution. The good news is that we are not alone. God will look after us until the day Christ comes again. Now we ask ourselves, does this passage relate to the broader biblical and theological framework? We read in Hebrews 13 verse 5, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. That's a message of hope. Then John 15 verse 18, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it will love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember what I told you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obey my teaching, they will obey yours also. So we see now that to be a Christian is not easy, but God is with us, and in the end we will triumph. Then we test our findings by reading Bible commentaries or study Bibles, just to see whether we're on the right track or not. And when you read Bible commentaries, it will tell you that we do minister in a broken reality. We will experience some tough times, but God will look after us. We don't need to worry. Now we ask ourselves, is this message applicable or not? If it is an incidental, we don't apply it, because incidentals have to do with something that's cultural, ceremonial, or civil. And we know that the ceremonial laws were fulfilled in Jesus Christ. We don't need to observe them anymore. And the other thing is, we need to determine whether this message is an essential. If it's not incidental, it is an essential, and if it's an essential, we do apply it. And so we see that this message is indeed an essential, because it has nothing to do with cultural, ceremonial, and civil laws. A moral has to do with relationships, has to do with love, and God will still look after us. So we communicate it in the 21st century. You can, in a small group, have the discussion on the following questions. You can also read day 362 of the Bible as your GP's devotional for more information. Thank you.